Hey everyone, thank you for joining me on another episode of the Rescue One podcast. This episode, we're talking with Brendan Stackpole, retired firefighter from a large county department in Virginia. He's also the host of the Things We All Carry podcast and a fellow Black Sheep Battalion member, if you will. He's been pushing the envelope on some of the concepts about why things are taboo in the fire service, whether it's psychedelics or medical marijuana or things that could be beneficial for us. He's always been a person who questions the reasons why these things are taboo, not necessarily the items themselves. But he's a super interesting guy to talk to, and I hope you enjoy this episode with me and Brendan Stackpole. Yeah, but the last time we spoke on the podcast was January of 2023. That's a while. Lots happened since then.
Yeah. So what is happening since then? For me?
Yeah.
Oh man, I'm gonna tell you what. There's a lot happening since then. I had a year of straight up turmoil. Let's go with that.
Yeah.
You know, most people, if you haven't listened to my show, you can go back and hear some of what I've talked about for the last, what's been going on for the last 4 or 5 years in my life, and it all came to a head last year. Let's see. So January 23. Fast forward to February 23, my divorce became final. Fast forward to Halloween of 23, my mom passed away from after a long battle with cancer. Fast forward to February of 24, I step away, quote unquote, retire from the fire service. And so within a year, I had a divorce. I had my mom die, and I stepped away from the fire service. And it was, two of those things I pretty much did to myself, and then my mom's death. But it's a lot. It's a big wave to ride. Let's put it that way.
No joke. All that change all of a sudden, and what did that do to your support system? I mean, like, I'm sure.
It decimated it.
Yeah,
decimated it. I've talked about this, and I might have talked about it with you a little bit, but I've talked about it quite a bit on the show. Is we have this major issue in the fire service where if someone steps aside, there's a vacuum seal on the door when it shuts, and I lived in Kansas for a while, and I remember being in the house one time when a tornado just touched down nearby, and all my doors in the house went and just shut. And that's what leaving the fire service feels like, is that door shuts. And I've talked about going back to the firehouse as a guest, and it's weird to ring the doorbell instead of just punch your code in and go in.
Yeah. I worry about that, and I see other guys that I are near and dear to my heart that are near retirement, and I worry about that too. Luckily, a lot of them have been good, but there's serious shit that goes on, man. With between the ears after you retire, and it's hopefully most of it's good. I'm sure. What's like some of the what are some of the positives after you've retired that you felt like, as far as maybe the way you, I don't know, get fulfillment or see yourself as far as like a path, that your life is going to take?
That's, you talk about path, and it's funny. I had a haircut the other day with my barber, and she's going, she has her own thing that she's going through. And we've had this connection where we kind of talk about mental health, and we talk about life. And I have this firm belief that your barber is your other therapist, and they hear everybody's story, but we just happen to connect with our story. And she asked me that the other day. She goes, "How's life? How you doing?" I said, it's crazy and chaotic. And she goes, "Well, tell me why." And one of the things that I've been trying to adjust to is, after the 11 or 12 years that I did in the fire service, you got used to a routine, you got used to a schedule, you got used to kind of a regimented day, even though every day could be different at the firehouse. When you leave that and you put that in your wake, you don't have that. And if you're like me and you're that special type of ADHD or whatever you want to call it, that struggles to set a schedule, struggles to set a routine, you flounder for a bit. And that's where I found myself, and I still do most days, kind of like, okay, what do I do today? What do I have to do? And it's hard for me to adjust to that part of it. But the benefit far outweighs that negative, being the sleep, the better schedule. I can set that schedule once I get used to it, but that sleep is the biggest part for me, and the ability to just be me instead of being that firefighter.
There's a lot I wanted to bring up with your retirement. Did you feel like you left too early?
Okay, this is multi-layered because I started too late.
Yeah, I
Instead
know
of
you were in
saying
the
I
army
left,
before.
yeah, well, I spent some time in the army. Then I moved around because my ex was active duty, so I moved around, from station to station with her, and then I joined the fire service when I was 44. When my children had were were kind of adults by then, and so I could do something like that. So when I joined the fire service, I was 44, and I said to myself in my rookie year, as long as I can maintain how I'm doing it now, I'm going to stay in the fire service. With the change of schedule and obviously 12 extra years added to me, well, 11 extra years added to me, the decision that became simple. I wasn't able to give the fire service what I needed to give to feel like I was doing the job correctly. Um, it, and I I heard James Geringer from Behind the Shield podcast in my ear saying, for him it was a force multiplier. I can go and pick up an old woman at 2:30 in the morning and affect that life, or I can reach out to thousands with a podcast and affect their lives. And so
Yeah.
the force multiplier is, you add that to the physical aspect of the job, and it was a no brainer to me that it was time to step away. And you also add to the fact that I went through that losing my mom, and it was just felt like the right time, emotionally, physically, and not definitely not economically, because I could have stood to build a pension a little more, but I do have something there,
Yeah, then it's a blessing, because there's a reason to leave. There's motivation to leave. There's like positives to leaving. So, I mean, that's all we could all ask for. I fear the day where we're forced to go, and it's all negative, because people put a lot of their own. It's asking a lot of somebody to sacrifice their physical and mental well being for in service of others, and you put your heart and soul into that. So when you have to leave before you're ready, then it's shitty. So I think that's a positive. But as far as like, I want to go back to what you said about, I guess, first of all, the vacuum that happens where the doors kind of slam shut.
Yeah.
If you had to, I know it's hard to describe the feeling, but I mean, what do you do to cope with that?
And I'm gonna preface that answer with this. I went back to the firehouse a couple of days ago. Actually, after getting my haircut, I dropped in, and I realized that door swings both ways. So I wasn't as good as staying involved in their lives either.
Mm,
Does that make
damn.
sense? Um, I walked in and I saw these people that, first of all, a couple of them I didn't even realize were in the station, in station where I left. And I walked in, and they were like, "Oh, you never returned a text," one of my buddies says. And I said, "Yeah, I did." And he shows me the text, unanswered text, right? And then
Mm.
someone else chimes in. "Oh, let me show you mine." And someone else chimes in. And there were four of them in there that were waiting for answers from me, and we're talking not just days or weeks, probably months.
They
And
brought the
so it
receipts.
hits me like, okay, I slammed the door too, apparently, and that's on me. So it is a two-way road. It is all
Mm.
is what I need to preface that with. And going back to your question, how do I deal with losing that support? I thankfully I have people like I can engage with, like, even you, TJ, Stephanie, Jim Bernica, those people who are these sounding boards. Some of my guests who have become friends, uh, and they're checking in on me, and and we're going back and forth and bouncing ideas off of each other. So it's realizing that I need to build a community that's my community, and I'm not going to rely solely on myself to go through life.
Yeah, I guess when I've seen guys retire and girls retire that do the best, they have that they have that community built before they leave.
Yes.
you know, and
And-
I love that some of my closest friends are guys on the job with me, but um, I can still disconnect from the job too. Funny that the business that I run has so much to do with the fire service, but it is also so different from the fire
yeah.
service. I mean, it's related to it, yeah, because I'm helping our guys and girls, but it's none of the very few skills from the fire service apply to it, and that I think is healthy to have that outlet. But you know, is the podcast like where do you find fulfillment right now? I'm assuming it's podcast. Like
Yeah,
I see you're more active, you know.
it's definitely the podcast. And then I'm drafting up ideas for writing either articles or a book.
It's
And,
cool.
and I'm working in bits and pieces here and there. And then just finding I guess I find some fulfillment in just kind of finding that journey, finding out what's going to work for me, because it almost feels like this is the first time I'm doing something for me. And that's different, if that makes sense.
It makes total sense, and I mean you're at a time of your life. It's kind of renewal, right? I mean, fuck, everything's new, like everything, you know.
Everything's new. Yeah, you're right. Everything's new just because, but see, I forced it to be new.
Good or bad. I mean, we're here, right?
Right.
You know, did you move by chance? Did you move? Did you
No,
also
I'm still in
move?
Virginia.
Okay, in the same
Yeah.
place.
Yeah.
Yeah, so at least there's that. That's you
Yeah.
know, but like everything else, your job, you know, marriage, kids, like moving out, and you know, you're kind of on their own, and you just have it is, you know, you've sacrificed and you've given time and effort and everything to other people your whole life. Um, it's like having roommates forever and then just like living on your own for once, you know. It's in a more that's minimizing it, but yeah, like you have I get it. I totally get it. You have a lot of choice, you know, and I guess freedom of that choice, I guess, you know, as far as what you want to do with your time, where you probably didn't before.
No, I didn't before. I mean, yeah, for the last couple of years, I've kind of had a freedom of choice, but it's dictated by our fire department schedule, and it's dictated by visits to my mom with her health or whatever. But
Yeah.
yeah, nowadays I wake up and it's my responsibility to figure out what I'm doing for the day,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
there's a certain sense of freedom, like you say, to it, but there's also a certain sense of dread as well, because it is all my responsibility.
Yeah. So to kind of finish up that question though, as far as like the door ceiling, it is
Yeah,
two ways. So
yeah.
you're you're um you're noticing that yeah you kind of left, but also you know that those people who you were close with, maybe you weren't answering their texts as much, but is I guess the question would be, are you still trying to, do you find that you have to, maybe you're not texting them back because you have your support system, you know, and like it doesn't have to be ingrained in the job anymore.
I would love to say that's the answer, but I'm going to be completely honest with you, because why not? I think it's more of an isolation thing.
What do you mean?
I think that it's it's my typical response to something is to isolate, and you can ask our mutual friends that, you know, I texted TJ the other day and he answered me, and I disappeared for a while. And the next text from him was like, "Come on, man, why do you do this?" And that's what I do. It's kind of a protection thing for me. If I isolate, then it's me. It's not anybody else. I'm it's my choice. And if I really want to get down to the root of it, I'm sure my therapist, if she's listening, could tell you that, oh no, this is a childhood thing, because it's easier to isolate than to face that thought of abandonment.
Hmm. It's interesting that the choice is isolation if you're fearing abandonment because you're like
But it's control.
you're
I
alone.
control it.
Yeah. Oh, it makes sense. I think everybody has coping, right? And there's good and there's bad. Um, I always wonder about what I would be like after I retire. Like, do I, you know, I've heard this saying a lot where they're like, hey, don't, I'm paraphrasing, but they're like, don't break your back for a job that'll replace you in a day,
Right.
you know? And I totally understand that. And I agree with it to an extent. But I also tell my new guys, like when we're training them, don't be offended that we replace you immediately. This is the fire service.
Right.
It's, in the same, better, but in the same way that the military can't have their entire structure
No.
crumble just because somebody left. We have to have that. We have to have that replacement mentality where we're like, hey, this department supersedes any individual, and we're going to keep on rolling no matter who's here. So it's it sucks as an individual if you think like I'm replaceable, but it's the job is replaceable, but the personality, I always tell my guys, is
Yeah.
never replaceable.
No.
Nobody's going to replace you. You are unique, 100%.
And I fully agree with that. And I guess I should say you expect the fire department to replace you. It's obvious you can't just have gaps and play jingo with staffing in the firehouse. Obviously that's going to collapse eventually, and you can't get away with that. I think that door slammed shut. You do have these relationships. You have these friends, these crew members, these buddies, whatever you want to call them. We love to bandy about the words brotherhood and family, correct? In the fire service. I think some of that is overblown in some cases and bastardized in other cases, that when you do step away, you really do quickly find out who you were, your actual friends or your actual brothers or sisters in the fire department when you step away from it, because now it requires effort to stay involved.
Yeah, and I think that's like a human condition. That's
Of course.
that's a lot of people.
Plus, you add to the fact that my guys are working 24-hour shifts, day on, day off, with 4 days off, and their schedule doesn't meet up with any kind of normal life, right?
What's that schedule called again? That's the
they call it the
56-hour
Nova schedule.
Nova. Yeah, that's the 56-hour work
It's
week.
fucking horrible. It's horrible. It's one of the main reasons I stepped aside, to be honest with you, because I couldn't recover it well enough.
It's so weird. I've talked to people, I can't say names because they swore me to not say it, but I've talked to people affiliated and or at a high level of the IAFF.
Mm-hmm.
And they have said, they're like, the schedule, talking about the schedule or changing the schedule as like a national agenda is taboo. You don't do that. I think they'll approach a 56-hour work week and they'll say, hey, you guys need to go to a 24/48. You guys need Kelly days. You guys should do maybe a 24/72. But talking about reducing it anywhere down from a 24-hour shift is like highly suppressed. Some research shows 24-hour might not be, even if you break it up, to something more manageable, but a 24-hour shift in general. I personally would rather have a 24-hour shift. I know what that does to my sleep and whatever else, but yeah, that's an interesting thing that they're huddled around that in unison.
Well, that 56-hour work week, and listen, we're not unique. Departments have different schedules, and they all have their pros and cons. But when people would ask me about the 56, I say, well, first of all, it's kind of a misnomer. It averages out to 56, but if you look at it, your work week is 72. Because you're doing, we would do day on, day off, day on, day off, day on, 4 off. So your work week out of those 5 days is 72 hours working.
Right.
And
that's 72 hours of disrupted sleep. Yeah.
That's assuming that you're not doing any voluntary overtime or mandatory overtime.
Yeah.
Which we all know isn't true.
Yeah. Yeah.
We all know it.
How many of those guys work second jobs?
Oh man, I wish I had real data for it. Anecdotally,
like
70%, 75%.
That's crazy to me. Like, how do you? It's got to be their own businesses. Then they've got to set their own schedule. There's no way like
that, or they work for family or something like that. Yeah, or they do real estate, which is basically your own business. Right. It's something that you can manage outside of those hours.
Okay, yeah, that makes more sense, because I think of my guys. One of the most common things for our new guys to do is go work like at a hospital. as a medic, and I'm like, you can't throw them your schedule like that. And if it's that screwed up, they'd be like, no, thanks. We're not doing it. Our guys, you and I have talked about this before, but my department's one of the few that have a 24/72 in Florida. And it's really starting to become more popular. We were the first ones in the state to have it. It's starting to come around a lot more, and I'm glad because it's a game changer for longevity in the fire department. And also one benefit that they never think about is hurricanes. So when we have to upstaff for hurricanes, you have 4 shifts of people.
Yeah.
So you can have 48 hours of personnel. We double staff. So like if the hurricane's hitting on a Monday morning, they call in the shift that's going to be there Monday. They call them in on Sunday.
Right.
So now you have 48 hours of crew there. You work a crew for 24, and then they go in reserve for 24 without having to leave the firehouse. Well, you still have 48 hours of crews back home. So once those guys get wrecked, because hurricanes are rough,
yeah,
you're
I can imagine.
It's weird because all these calls come in, and you're sitting in the station, and you can't go to any of them. And dispatch calls you on the phone and says, here are the calls we have. They're stacked. And they line them up, and it'll be like automatic alarm, medical alarm, stroke, fall with, knee pain, heart attack, and you're like, okay, we'll take these first, obviously.
Right.
But then you go out, you just write down the addresses, and you just start going one at a time to all of them. And it's crazy, but that shit happens all day and all night. As soon as there's, the hurricane leaves, when the winds die down, you jump out. But you want to be able to rotate the guys through. So you have this reserve also, like troops. So when these guys aren't fresh anymore, you bring in 2 more days of troops. And it's like, logistically, it's cake. But there's other stuff to it, and a lot of people think they have to hire a lot. I'm like, the Kelly Day, eliminating the Kelly Day, all those people that have those Kellys, you only need to increase your staffing, a marginal percent. It's not like you have to hire an entire other shift.
Right.
So it's very interesting. I wish more people would look at it. It's funny, man. I don't know how your guys are. I'm sure you guys would just do anything to get off the 56, but a lot of places that have a Kelly Day, you'll see a resistance to change to a 24/72 because they don't want to lose the Kelly. And most of the people that are saying that have a Friday, Saturday, or Sunday Kelly.
It's funny you say Kelly Day, because that's what we had before we went to the 56. 4.5 years ago or so. We're 24/48 with a Kelly, what? and it's a great schedule if you ask me. Yeah. Again, pluses and minuses everywhere, right?
Yeah.
But because they saw this chance to reorganize, and my county's a little convoluted because it was a combination system, technically still is. But I think some of the old heads saw this chance to jump on a schedule that would force volunteers out of the system, which I think where I am isn't feasible because because of how the growth was going, we still needed to have some supplemental staffing through volunteers. But the difference was, instead of being a volunteer system with career supplementing volunteers as it was designed, you turned it on its head, and now it was a career with volunteer supplementing, and they never were able to make that cohesive, right. Because the volunteers resented the fact that we were coming in, and then our guys resented the fact because there were volunteers there. And so they jumped at this chance to go, okay, we had a 24/48 with a Kelly shift schedule, but then we also had day work schedule. So some stations in volunteer houses were working day shift, 06 to 06, 4 days a week. And they saw this chance to get everybody on shift, and it wasn't the explicit reason to do it, but I think undercover, one of the reasons was trying to force volunteers out. And they said they jumped at this 56-hour work week, and we went from that schedule to the Nova schedule, and it's kind of wrecked people.
I can only imagine. I mean, giving up that's such a step backwards. It's crazy. That's super rough, but that's a common schedule around you guys. I think Fairfax County does it, right?
Yeah. There are a number of the municipalities in the I will say Nova, but I don't think many Maryland agencies are doing it. I'd have to ask either TJ or and find out what they're doing. I'm not sure, but yeah, in Virginia, that's a very popular one.
Yeah. Yeah. Virginia. Yep. Yeah. We don't, nobody has that down here. That's like unheard of. But as far as policy, speaking of policy on the department, did your guys got THC a little bit before you left, right? The
Yeah, it was
ability
a couple of, it was a year or two. Um, yeah, what happened was, Virginia had medical marijuana, and then it eased into recreational, which is a convoluted system. We're not even going to get into the particulars about recreational marijuana in Virginia because you can't legally buy it anywhere. Doesn't make sense.
interesting.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. So when they got medical marijuana, some of the guys got their cards, obviously, and at one point in time, one of our guys tested positive, and the department wanted to fire him. Excuse me, and the fire chief said, "No, you're done. We're not doing this. It's a zero tolerance policy." And it's kind of funny because they had put no notice out about what we were doing when medical marijuana took place until the night before the law was to take action. And then they sent out a reminder of the zero tolerance policy, and that was their action. So this guy tested positive, and they put him on light duty, and they put him through the whole legal rigmarole with county and stuff. And then our county attorney said, we can't fire him for this. There's employee protections for medical marijuana use. He wasn't impaired on duty. We cannot, and I will not fire him for this. And that's how we kind of backdoored our way into being allowed to use THC off duty.
Have you guys, I mean, since then, and if you have heard, I don't, if you're still in the loop or whatever, since then, have there been any big issues with discipline, with um, all the common things that people would assume, like people calling out like sick usage too much or workers' comp or anything like that?
No, I haven't. I have not heard anything, either, data driven or anecdotally that has a downside to being able to use. I think it's a common sense thing, just like alcohol. I mean, it used to be obviously we know back in the day, quote unquote, people might come in still a little drunk or hungover because they partied a little too long the night before. Um, that's in my opinion, from what I've seen, that's a thing of the past, and you're not seeing that, and you're definitely not seeing people just walk in stoned, which I think that was this unfounded fear of the dinosaurs was, hey, these guys are going to be smoking on the job. That's ridiculous. It's just like any other thing. People aren't coming in impaired to work, and if they do, there's a legal ramification for it.
That's I have that now. I still have that on my department, and people that aren't old, it's very weird the thought that is presupposed there, where they just say, I've had somebody say to me, like, you want guys just showing up high? You want to work with guys that just smoke weed all day? I'm like, I work with guys that drink all day.
Yeah.
And listen, I'm not advocating for alcohol. I drink, but you turn it off. That's the only thing that makes you a professional.
Right.
Are you going to, stand up to your obligations? Are you going to make it happen? So, I mean, my father was an alcoholic forever and the best dad. I mean, he was a great dad. I had an awesome childhood, but he was an alcoholic, and that dude, and I'm not advocating for alcoholism or anything, but as heavy as a drinker he was, I never saw that guy even call out sick from work.
Yeah.
I don't know what the fuck he's made of. Okay. Dude still gets up at 5 a.m. every day. I mean, he would drink a lot of coffee, but, and he's an electrician. Like, the dude works, he's still working. He's 64. He's still working. He's actually, one of the co-founders for Rescue One. I mean, he's like, he travels to conferences with us, and he always does shit, but,
pay him more so he doesn't have to work.
I told him, well, that's the plan next year, man. Actually, I know. I'm like, but he's like, last week he's running a chipping hammer all day.
Yeah.
The guy's in great shape. So I hope those genes pass to me. But the dude's in great shape, and 64 still running chipping hammers and freaking digging ditches and shit. Anyway, the dude makes his obligations, and I think our guys are like that to some extent. They have vices, but they make it to work. The thing about it
You-
is, THC isn't addictive like that. It's not a. It's you
no.
can have a vice on anything. You can have a vice to CrossFit, but it's an interesting dynamic. That's not the same.
Well, I love the ability for our guys to use THC as a medicine. I don't get me wrong, I love it. What I see happening in a few cases is we've replaced one crutch with another,
Yeah,
and in those cases, if you're drinking because you've got shit going on in your life, and you just switch to smoking or edibles because you've got shit going on in your life, well, you're still just using a crutch.
yeah.
You're not getting to the base or the root of the problem. So I think in that case, there needs to be a look in the mirror going, okay, what are you doing? Why are you doing it? And why are you doing so much of it? And I think replacing one crutch with another one just because it's healthier doesn't mean it's right. And so while I advocate for that use, I advocate for a very smart use as well.
I respect so much about what you're saying. This is the um, direction that city of Pittsburgh fire department took, where
Mm-hmm.
they, you know, explicitly stated to their membership, we're not advocating for recreational use. We're advocating for medicinal use. We're not going to test for THC. So, get your card and do what you got to do. But this is a conversation between you and your doctor. And
Right.
that's the beginning and end of this conversation that we're going to have is I'm not going to tell you what you should and should not use marijuana for. Let a medical professional tell you that, which I think is a really smart way to do it. Um, but you're right. And I've, having my father going through AA for so long and just being interested in that process, the first thing they do like is, and there is some benefit to it, but they replace your addiction with cigarettes and
Mm-hmm.
with a higher power, right?
Yeah.
And because they know, and maybe that's the way it has to be, but they know your shortcomings as a human and all of our shortcomings as a human is that we have moments of weakness, and if
Mm-hmm.
you give it up to a higher power, you submit your weakness and you're like, I'm not in charge, someone else is, and I'm trusting in that person or
Mm.
thing to get me through this. And whether it's helped along with that crutch of cigarettes, my dad recently stopped smoking too, which is badass because he's smoked his entire life and
Yeah.
he drank for a
Jesus.
long, long, long time.
Those are
And
two really tough things to give up.
yeah, and if you see him, you're like, he doesn't look like he doesn't look like he was a heavy smoker or drinker, but you know, um, it's he's a tradesman and his father was a lineman for FPNL and was in the Navy and like he's just one of those dudes. He's one of 11 kids. He's just one of those dudes. He's a tradesman that smokes cigarettes and drinks beer. But they they have that understanding that vices are probably going to be there because of the underlying stuff.
Yeah.
And I don't know if we should, like as a fire service, do we take the AA approach where we're like, hey, look, if you're going to replace one crutch with another, i.e., you're going to stop drinking, but you're going to use THC a little bit more, or start using THC, I should say. Just like in AA, you stop drinking, but you know, you lean on the higher power and you smoke a lot of cigarettes and coffee and stuff. Is it better? Yeah, maybe. But I think the other part of it is AA will tell you, hey, you shouldn't do this stuff, but you should also seek therapy. It's not just a matter of
Yeah.
following the 12 steps and going by the
Yeah.
big
Let's get
book.
to the root of the problem.
What's the root? Because why did you have this vice in the first place? And I know part of it is genetics. I get that, but uh, the you're predisposed to it for a reason. We started down that route as a human for a reason. And it's in different levels too. Like you hear some of the stories of these people, and you're like, I don't know what I've ever complained about. I don't have any real problems. That person has real problems, and it's like it's intense. So I wonder about that, but it's a good start, right? I mean, isn't that like a positive change, even if it's maybe not perfect?
What you mean to have access to THC and
Instead of
either
drinking.
medicinally or recreationally?
Yeah, instead of drinking. I mean,
Well, yeah, definitely. I think it's, again, if we want to go, we want to rank healthy vices. It's much healthier than drinking, and it's not addictive in the sense of a physical addiction. I think there's an addiction to that crutch though still, and
yeah,
and I think, as you said, let's combine that though. Okay, so you want to use THC to relax, or you want to use it to sleep. When you and I can talk about sleep, because I know that what you offer in one of your products is much better than smoking a joint because of how everything reacts with the, because what is it? Is it CBDA is better for sleep than pretty much anything?
CBD. Yeah, just CBD
Yeah.
by itself. Yeah,
And I know that the CBD can be broken down into different categories of CBD. And so anyway,
hmm
so if you want to use it smartly, but don't ignore what else is going on in your life.
right.
And listen, I'm as guilty of that as anybody. I just recently, 2 days ago, sent an email off to my therapist going, "Hey, I need a checkup. I need to talk." And it's been a long time. I think I've only spoken to her once since my mom died. That's inexcusable. That means I haven't dealt with all of that. And so I know I've got stuff there, and I know I need to talk, but I'm not also just numbing out every night either.
Yeah, that's what I think. That's a good way to put it. I don't think we should numb out, because if you're going to numb out from alcohol and just say, well, it's better to just numb out from THC. That's a shit reason to start using THC or advocating
Yeah.
for the use of THC. That's a shit reason to do it.
Look, if
Um,
you're going to tell me you want to smoke a joint because you want to laugh your ass off that night, let's by all means go smoke a joint. Because I'd
yeah,
rather you laugh than become an angry drunk.
yeah, or just the effects on your liver. And I mean, for us, we have departments around us. I think this is a good way to do it. The Florida Heart Lung Bill
Hmm.
basically tied into our ability to have a cancer presumption clause for
Right.
firefighters, which is great. Our city, and our city is like the only one that enforces this, but our city does not allow us to use tobacco products of any kind.
Right.
Can't dip, can't smoke,
Yeah.
because I think that's what it says, tobacco products, not nicotine products, tobacco products. So technically you could use Zyn
Zin. Yeah. The
because it's
backbone of the
just
fire department.
it's just nicotine. There is no
Right.
tobacco in it. But anyway, I digress. They don't want us using that because they want to prove that
Yeah.
they don't want any. We're self-insured,
It's
so
the
they
same
don't
thing
want
up
any
here.
paying. Yeah. So
Yep.
if I get caught smoking a cigar, I'm terminated immediately. So
Yeah.
that they're like that serious about it. It's not like a second chance or like a written up. It's fired. Uh, so pretty wild. But with that, you know, we've kind of put ourselves in that category. We're like, okay, if we get legal marijuana, we can't smoke it, So guys started using gummies, in the departments around us, where they would say, hey, look, officially we're asking you to use gummies. Like unofficially, I can't see what you guys are doing. It's not like we're testing
Right.
what route you ingested this by, but please just be smart and don't smoke it. Just use an edible if that's what you're trying to do.
But see,
Um,
that opens up a conversation as to ignorance of the medicine as well,
right.
because as you know, and I'm assuming most of the audience would know that route and that administration is important for what you're trying to use THC for.
Yeah. And
You know,
decarboxylating THC, like taking THCA and doing it, it could be something cleaner like a vape pen.
yeah,
Um, and even if you do smoke it, I mean, it is what it is. The amount of byproducts in a joint is basically limited to, if the bud is clean anyway, it's
yeah,
basically limited to whatever you wrapped it in
yep,
versus a cigarette, which
yeah,
we don't even need to have that. Everybody knows. So, but
yeah.
vaping, and the cat's not out of the bag on vaping. I don't know. We don't know what's in that shit yet. And
Yeah, I don't
it,
trust it. I'll be honest with you.
yeah, I don't.
I just
That's
don't.
honestly why we don't have vape juice.
Yeah,
Um, Not to mention, I can't create it on my own, and we make everything
yeah,
because I want to be able to take the raw ingredient and treat
yeah,
it
yep.
with a chain of custody. And I can't. I don't have equipment to make vape juice. I don't even want to know what goes into that stuff.
Oh, it's extremely
Um,
flammable too, isn't it?
yeah, it is. Yeah, I remember that
Yeah,
LA fire that freaking took those guys out.
right.
Almost killed them. That was a vape shop. I've had vape shop fires. started by lithium ion, and
Yeah.
they'll go up. Those
You
little
know,
cartridges go up.
going back to the THC CBD thing, in years ago when I started pushing this, hey, why can't we have this? Is this a medicine? This is something that we should be allowed to use responsibly off duty. I had those conversations with my fire chief at the time, and when I first brought it up, he said to me, literally, he goes, "I don't want you coming in high on CBD." And I was like, "Oh, we have to start ground level." And to his credit, and he and I clashed heads quite often, but his credit, he listened, and he let us talk to him about it. He let us kind of inform him and school him. And to be honest, in this realm of alternative medicines, that's all you can ask for, is to have an open ear and actually listen to what people are saying about it to you when you're in that leadership position. Because he and I took our conversations from CBD to THC to psychedelics to and to ketamine to and he, of course, he's not going to go, "Oh yeah, well that sounds like a viable option," but at least he listened to what I was saying.
Yeah, that makes me so happy. I have no problem with people after I talk to them about CBD or marijuana. If they afterwards say like, totally get what you're saying, I just disagree with its use. I don't want. I
Mm-hmm.
don't knowing what it does. And yes, there are some benefits. I still don't want it to advocate for its use. Like, at least you're making an informed decision. That's just a
Right.
matter of opinion at that point. And who cares if that's your opinion or not? But what drives me up the fucking wall is people that are so close minded they don't even want to hear it, or they miss it. They miss the message entirely. That's this new thing that I started dealing with. It's just driving me nuts. When I start the conversation by saying, "Hey, look, we got to do better about our sleep," immediately they're like, "Can't fucking hack it, quit, bro." You're like,
Oh, that's a go-to, right?
like, dude, I would say this drives me nuts. I'm like, first of all, check your fucking tone. Okay. You don't know me. And I really like working busy firehouses. For 15 years, I worked at the two busiest firehouses we had on purpose. I love working at busy stations. You have the best time, you have the best crews.
Yeah.
It is hard physically on you, but some of the best people work in the busiest firehouses. I want to be there. Okay. And I like running calls, even if they're after midnight. I'm a sucker for punishment in that respect. So don't talk to me like you know me. But then on top of that, why are you so resistant to even listening to the rest of what I had to say? And I don't even want to psychologically try to unpack what baggage they're holding, where they have to show how tough they are by being a keyboard warrior or whatever else,
Yeah.
where they're like, no, 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 look at me. I'm fucking tough. I don't need to sleep. And I'm like, all right, Junior, you're gonna figure this out one day. Okay. I
Yeah.
promise. But they see it as like a coping mechanism for the week. And it's not any farther. It can't be farther from the truth. It's crazy. That's also a tough one. And I think if more people were like your fire chief, your ex fire chief, or if he's still the fire chief, I don't know.
No, he's not. We've
Yeah.
moved on from internal and brought someone in from the outside who from
Ooh,
all from
I gotta
all
ask you about that.
all looks, it seems like he's swimming in an upstream battle or against some of the old heads in the department who don't want to change, and I think that are resistant to his change, and they think that if they anyway they their resistance was some of what he wants to do, but I think he's fighting the good fight.
Okay, that's good. Yeah, but I wish more people would be like that. It leads me into my next point. So every year when I go
Yeah.
to FDIC, I kind of gauge the temperature of marijuana in the fire service. And every
Hmm.
year, because CBD is interlinked, it's both cannabis, but our cannabis doesn't have THC in it. That's the only
Right.
difference. But when I first went there, I had a lot of side eye and a lot of dirty looks, a lot of like people just like, this guy's fucking killing the job, man. Like I was the downfall of the U.S. Fire
Right.
Service somehow. And last year, at times, Stack, there was a fucking line to talk or to ask questions or to buy the product. And that happened for a week straight.
Yeah.
And I'm like, something is changing very, very quickly. And I think what happened with cannabis is a combination of an old generation leaving, but then also the remainder being really open to it and the education kind of coming around. But it was like, what's the saying? Like change happens slowly and then it happens all at once.
Yeah.
Right. So I see that with cannabis from your side, because I am not an expert. I'm not an expert in anything, not CBD or marijuana. I'm a student, but I'm not a student at all of ketamine or psilocybin. I know the basics, but I wonder if that's going to be the next thing. Like, is the understanding of psilocybin, and I think ketamine probably sooner than psilocybin, just from the steps I've seen it take. Have you noticed that at all? I know you talk about it a lot more.
Have I noticed that would be the next logical spot to go?
Yeah, what's the temperature? Like, is change? Are people more open to it now? As far as like when you talk to your guests, or just in the fire service in general? Because I know people are very resistant to psilocybin, probably more than ketamine, but still, as far as like psychological treatments and things.
Well, obviously, ketamine is much more accepted simply through the fact that it's legal treatment in all 50 states. You can find a ketamine clinic in your state and go undergo treatment, and then hopefully you pair that with a therapist as well.
Yeah.
Because then you can process what you've experienced while you were under this ketamine drip, basically. And yeah, I think a side note there, if you're a medic and you go through ketamine treatment and you understand how that affects you, you're going to use ketamine a little differently on the street if it's in your drug box, because you'll understand.
I've given it several times.
Right. And so now if it's you're slamming a pretty good sized dose of ketamine into a body, and it will create hell in their brain. It'll sedate them, but it'll create hell in their brain at the same time, where you're getting the same dose of medicine over an extended period of time just to keep you on a plateau in the therapy session. Uh, uh, my friend and guest that was on about ketamine, Alexandra Jabbar, she kind of explained her sessions and how it worked for her, and it's amazing that they're using basically less ketamine to induce this state for the therapeutic values. And if you use it improperly, and a lot of times we are using it improperly on the streets, it's we're using it properly for the reason it's on the drug box, but it might be affecting people differently. I think ketamine is scares people, but people are open to talking about it because it's legal. It's a Schedule 3 drug as opposed to a Schedule 1 drug. Anytime you venture in and you talk about psilocybin or LSD or MDMA, which all have these great therapeutic values, I think that scares the shit out of people, because they've been taught that these are the heavy drugs, the hard drugs that are really going to screw you up. It's not true. I mean, again, I'm not saying, hey, just go out and take these things whenever you want. I'm saying, let's do this in a proper setting. And when you talk about psychedelics with firefighters, there's a lot of pushback. I have certain friends who are firefighters, and I know that they will use mushrooms, or they'll use some prefer LSD, some prefer mushrooms, some prefer MDMA. It's what you're comfortable and what you're looking for. But I think all of those things have so much value especially for neuroplasticity, that it's too important to ignore. And when we talk about the damage that our brains are incurring on a daily basis or a shift by shift basis, we need to create some neuroplasticity to get around some of that. And so we can open up new pathways and new ways of thinking. And I know that sounds woo, and I'm not talking like metaphysical ways of thinking, but getting out of your negative mindset.
Yeah, I don't see the then I'm kind of in an echo chamber, when it comes to talking to people about kind of cutting edge, I guess, alternative medicine or whatever, because people who are following this page or listening to this podcast are open to those ideas.
Yeah.
So
right.
I think it's good because I'm, getting positive reinforcement, but it's bad in that you need people to kind of argue with you sometimes. You
Oh
need
yeah.
people to challenge your thought process and to say, hey, what are the negatives here? Not addressing any negatives to any of these things or any cons means that you're not appropriately thinking about it. But I think that you're definitely onto something. And I know when you and I talk, like you're talking about psilocybin right now, I usually talk about CBD. We didn't do this research. This is stuff that you're talking about, years of research from doctors and scientists and
Yeah.
universities. We're speaking about all the stuff that's out there. It's not like me and Stack did this, but the point is that there's a lot that I think we're learning about what the job does to our brains. Neuroplasticity isn't a word that was ever used when I was going through Fire Academy or
No.
medic school. Nobody gave a fuck about the cancer rates. 16 years ago when I went, nobody gave a fuck about your sleep schedule because they were just like, sorry, dude, it's part of the job.
Yeah.
And it is. Signed up for it. And I love it. And I'm not going to change that. But when we are off duty, I want to take care of ourselves a little bit better. And I think, stuff like that is really hard to open and unwind and kind of like look at, as far as that conversation you had with your chief, like where he's like, I don't want guys come in. You tell somebody, hey, I want to use mushrooms. They're like, so you just want to do heroin now, and you're like, how did you connect those two? Where are you getting this? That's kind of the tone sometimes,
Side note, I mean, listen, there's benefits to heroin. I know people are going to freak out when I say that, but they're medicinal benefits to heroin. And it goes back to I'm not hold on, stop. I'm not saying, hey, let's do heroin. I'm just saying that
right.
these drugs have a purpose. And one of the books that kind of opened my eyes a little more to all this thing was all this stuff was a guy named Dr. Carl Hart, and he's a tenured professor at Columbia, and it's called Drug Use for Adults, I believe. And it's fascinating. This is a dude who is an upstanding citizen, who is a tenured professor at an Ivy League school, who's a professed drug user, and he will tell you that he has reasons for using each of these drugs, and he knows exactly what it's going to do for him and when he needs to use it.
Yeah.
And this is someone who says, hey, if I have a big presentation, and it's in his book, if I had this big presentation, I'm going to use this drug maybe a couple of days ahead of time because I know what it's going to set me up for 2 days from here.
Interesting.
So there's someone like Dr. Carl Hart, or if you look up all the studies and the research done by MAPS at Johns Hopkins, it's their success rate with psychedelics and PTSD is astronomical, and depression and all that. If you look, they had it set up for I think 3 trials, and again, I am quoting off the top of my head, so please do not hold me to this exact numbers, but
I'll put show
they had it
notes
set
in
up where you have 3 trials. So you're coming in and you're either getting a placebo or you're getting the drug. And their results were so stunning that people were saying, I don't need the third one. I'm good with 2. I'm sleeping. I'm not seeing things. I'm not hearing the screams. I'm not hearing that. And it's in essence fixing, which I hate to use the word fixing because we all know this is a continual journey. But these drugs, drugs, medicine, whatever term you want to use, are working, and we are not paying attention to them as a whole. From fire service or first responder world, we're not paying attention to it, and we're not only that, we're forcing our military veterans to go to South America to get this treatment instead of being able to treat them here because it's so frowned upon. But this is medicine that's been used for thousands of years.
Yeah.
But because it's not the Americanized system of medicine, it's not accepted.
Right. And this is why it's very dangerous to play with nature. I've experienced this personally in South Florida. I know you've been to South Florida a bunch. You go down to the Keys and stuff, but we have decades ago, we've introduced invasive species to try to correct the problem. Like we did it with Melaleuca trees.
Uh-huh.
We tried to, in the 50s and 60s, when there was a big construction boom, the population of Florida blew up when the air conditioner was invented.
Yeah.
Blew up. but they didn't know where to build, and they wanted to build out west, so they had to soak up all the water from the Everglades. So they imported Melaleuca trees.
Yeah.
They're horrible for the
You look up the
environment.
sugar industry and you'll understand why they did that.
Bingo. Right. So it's what's it? Florida crystals. Yeah, gnarly.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Yeah. Those
we do
brothers are
this.
dirty as fuck.
Yeah, I know. I wish we could get rid of them. But that'll get my podcast shut down. Instagram banned me. Now the podcast is going to ban me. I'm on a roll. So
you're welcome. You're welcome.
Hey man, black sheep, right? So we have this ability to fuck with nature, and it never ever ends up well. It always creates all these cascading problems. There's a lot of hubris on our part, and the same thing when we prohibit things too. Take marijuana for example. One of the largest system, and I have to double check this, so I don't want to. It's either the largest system or the second largest system in your body, receptor for receptor, even more than your nervous system, is the endocannabinoid system. There's more places for cannabinoids to attach in your body than any other ligand. So, and then you're taking the one thing that can stimulate that and you're making it illegal. Like, you have no idea what the implications of this are in the human body. That's very egotistical of you. It's arrogant isn't the word. You're toying with nature. Same thing with mushrooms. Any kind of substance that occurs in nature that has an effect on our body could be good or bad with respect to how you use it. If you eat the wrong mushroom, you might die. Right. But those aren't illegal. Lesson. Those aren't illegal. But, it's very interesting that we take this. And if you tried to get down to the reason why they became illegal, prohibited, criminalized, or even just scheduled into a drug, why that happened. So yeah, I don't want to downplay that enough. Like, I'm sorry, I can't downplay that enough. It's very dangerous. People don't know. And then as far as like the synthetic stuff, like LSD and MDMA, why those over psilocybin? I don't know enough about those.
I think it's a personal. Well, MDMA has a different effect than obviously psilocybin or LSD. I don't know. I obviously don't know your background with any of those medicines. I don't know if you've used any of it. And I'm not asking you to out yourself.
Oh no, I don't have a problem saying it. Psilocybin. Yes, I haven't used LSD or MDMA or anything.
MDMA was, man, way back in high school when it first started coming out. That's when I first used MDMA, and then then it was kind of wiped out for a while. I haven't done that in a very long time. But LSD or mushrooms, I wish I could explain the difference to you, but it's like it's the stupid old saying. It's pornography. You know it when you see it.
Right.
There's a different feel to those trips, basically. Mushrooms is a much more mellow experience, where LSD is a much more engaging experience. Remember, all these things are very personal to people because your body and your mind take them in. First of all, they meet you where you're at. That's where the set and setting and dose and everything comes into play. I think for me, when I would use in LSD, it would be almost more of an interactive thing, where mushrooms, I'm just kind of like, okay, it really just mellows me out, calms me down, and puts this fucking grin on my face that I can't explain,
Right.
It's one of those times where you just can't, and people that smoke pot will know there's sometimes where you hit a high and you're just like, oh, this is good. And you just can't stop laughing. And it's the same thing for mushrooms for me. When I find that spot and it just put this grin on my face, I don't even need to see color. I don't need to smell color. I just want that grin. I want that moment of relaxation. Someone that's more nuanced and more trained in the differences can tell you. And maybe that's listening to someone like Matt Zeman, who was a guest on the show, and that's what he talks about is psychedelics. He can get into specifics about what's the benefit versus, LSD versus mushrooms. I just know personally, I know how it feels for me.
But as far as like uh, you know, I guess another question would be why did I'm assuming you've done a bunch of research, but why did ketamine and psilocybin become the two methods of choice for treatment from psychiatrists and psychologists and things like that instead of like LSD or MDMA?
I mean, would you say that psilocybin is even mainstream choice for treatment?
Mainstream, no, but I know it gets done.
Well,
I
I
know
think
like
that,
Colorado and Washington.
yeah, but that's very, very, very isolated pockets in where it's either decriminalized or maybe legalized. And I believe the Denver area, it is legal. And like DC is decriminalized. So I can go into DC and gift, I can be gifted mushrooms for, I'll buy the bag and all of a sudden there's mushrooms in there. Right. So it's a decriminalized network in DC. So it I'm trying to think of why that would be. Why maybe that goes back to the nature versus man made in their heads,
Hmm.
where okay, it is a plant medicine, and so people are more comfortable with mushrooms that way. But that doesn't explain ketamine. I mean, ketamine
Yeah,
is not technically a psychoactive either. It's not a hallucinogen.
yeah. It's not by definition. I had a
Right.
recent citizen complaint, and man, it sounded terrifying. So she called to say, "Hey, you overdosed me on ketamine," you know,
Hmm.
and we went back and looked because that's part of my job in the EMS division. We went back and looked, and I'm like, "No, they gave you point. They give you yeah, it was 25 milligrams, so it's 0.25 milliliters." I'm like, "No, they 25 milligrams, a very small amount, and we give it really slow." And she was like, "Well, I remember everything, but
Hmm.
when you put me on the stretcher," she said, "I the guys were super nice, but then I just started hallucinating, and I said I saw myself getting put into a coffin, and the coffin was going into a hearse, and I was
Yeah.
going to get buried alive, you know." And she's like, and the whole time, that's what I thought, you know, I was getting buried alive. And so I talked to the crew, and they were like, she seemed fine. She was sitting on the stretcher. She was just staring off at nothing. She was very zoned out. She was just
Yeah.
in her own mind. I've personally given ketamine where people just have all kinds of reactions where they're very mild. They're looking around. They're like, man, I feel fantastic. And then I've had people like hold their limbs up like they're trying to grab for something for minutes at a time. You know, just it's very strange. I could see why it would be used for, just from an anecdotal perspective, I can see why it would be used for like a like an analysis type of treatment where you're trying to put people into that state where you can, you know, figure out what's going on, or even reintroduce stuff, you know, where you could try to dig into the problem.
Well,
But
that's
it could be dangerous, it seems like, you know, if you use too much.
one of the first therapeutic stories I'd ever heard of ketamine was a woman who had experienced a rape in her life,
Hmm.
and she had worked through trauma therapy. She thought she was over that, the majority of it, but she said she was still stuck on something. She couldn't figure out what she was stuck on, and so they suggested ketamine for her, and she did a ketamine session. And in that session, she reported, when she came out of it, she reported that she saw this alarm clock, and it turned out what she was seeing, and the thing she couldn't get past was that alarm clock, because when she was being raped, she turned to kind of disassociate from the perpetrator, and she faced the alarm clock, and the ketamine allowed her to get past that block and say, "Oh, that's what it is," and then to take that piece, take that to therapy, and build off of that for her to kind of complete that recovery.
That's heavy. Wow.
And so
Yeah,
that's
that's
the kind of thing that they're using ketamine for, is just kind of to unlock a little bit for you,
yeah.
to get you into that state.
My hat's off to therapists in general, psychiatrists, psychologists. They got messy work, man. That is
Yeah,
messy
they do.
work. You got to like, there's got to be courage in there because you are going into some dark places. And
Yeah.
That's like, I'm on the peer support team for my department, and I have no reservations about going when I was on shift, which I'm going to be back soon, hopefully. But when I go on shift, I have no reservations about what call could come across. You know, I was like, I'm fully aware we could do something very dangerous today, and I'm cool with that. But I fear one of my close personal people. I only have like about 300 guys in my department. Uh, I fear that one of them is going to call me with a crisis because I'm going to be attached to them. You know, I know everybody on that department, and I'm going to be attached to them, and I'm going to be terrified about the outcome. You know, that shit scares me. The job does not scare me. I get fearful like of really, really intense calls, obviously, like any human is supposed to, but I don't anticipate fear for the job. I anticipate fear for like a mental health crisis from someone, because I worry I'm not going to say the right thing. I don't know what to do. I'm worried that I'm going to hear something from somebody that I love that is fucked up. You know, I'm going to be like, damn, it's crazy. If it's a civilian, you know, you're just there to help and you feel good about trying to help. If it's someone you know, like shit, it's scary shit. So
it's
for
interesting
therapists to do it,
when people ask you, you know, how you doing, and then you get a little too real with them, and they're like, and then you both realize it at the same time. You're like, oh, I shouldn't have said that, and they're like, oh, I shouldn't have asked that, and then you're like, well, what do we do with that now?
Yeah,
I'm like, all right, all right, see you later, bud.
Yeah, there's a really interesting way to try to like end a conversation like that, you know, and that's that's why I always try to just tell people in general, and be like, hey, look, I know we can't sum it all up here, so if you ever want to talk, man, just give me a call, or if you want to go grab a beer or whatever it is, because I get that this is probably not a one conversation kind of thing,
right?
But yeah, that is a weird thing when you ask people how they're doing. You're like, are you really asking? This is formality, because that's how you know, I guess, who true friends are. And when you mentioned the Brotherhood of the Fire Service, like that really is a true gauge when people ask because they want to know.
Right.
Very few people, and not saying that there's not, you know, good people out there that wouldn't do it, but that differentiates between who's really close to the end, who's not. What gets you excited right now? Like, what are you looking forward to? You know, you have all this life change. I think, you know, maybe you have a path that you see yourself going down. What does that look like?
I think I mentioned at the beginning where I've been talking about writing a book, and I would love to take a few of these stories that I've told on the podcast, or excuse me, I haven't told them. The guests have told them. I've just given them a microphone and a place to share. I'd like to delve in deeper on a couple of stories and bring that to life in print and kind of encapsulate what these people are about and what their service has done to them or for them. And these, to me, there's so many of these stories are just amazing stories of perseverance and survival in some cases. I don't think that, you know, we as a whole, as a fire service as a whole, I still don't think we're doing a very good job of letting people know what the job is doing to us. Now, you know, you've made the comment a couple of times. Well, then if it's not for everybody. And I'm tired of hearing that. I think that if people can come to the realization that these folks are just running some shit calls sometimes, and this is what happens to your brain. It's the old, you know, anti-drug campaign. Here's your brain on drugs. It's the same thing. Here's your brain on trauma. And so if we can bring those stories to light and people can have a bigger and better appreciation for what those people specifically, and then us in general have gone through or are going through, I think it benefits us greatly in the long run.
Yeah. I commend you on that. Writing a book is, that's a life-changing event, you know, and it's also really crazy to think about it this way. I just told this to Jim. He was the last guest I interviewed on the podcast, which his is coming out soon, but you know, his book, which I don't know if you had a chance to read it yet.
Oh yeah. I'm looking right at it right now, actually.
Yeah, yeah, I have mine on my shelf right there. It's good. And it's too real. Like, and I say that in a really good way. I'm like, it's visceral, but there's going to be a entire generation of people, like all of us, or none of us live forever, but ideas continue to go on. And somebody had mentioned, they're like, usually after 2 or 3 generations, people don't remember you physically or personally. They
Right.
attach your name to a legacy of something, if you have one or not. And a book is that. A book is a legacy. And if you put that out into the world, it's kind of like immortality if you think about it. I mean, I don't want to like overstate it, I guess, or like get too philosophical, but I mean, it's cool because you have this collection of ideas that you have put down and that will stay around. I mean, in perpetuity. It's kind of wild. You still have books written by Marcus Aurelius. You still have the Sumerian texts. There's like some of the first writing. It's still there, and they didn't have the cloud, So
Yeah. Right.
it's kind of wild. That's something that'll just be there forever. So
Or
it's
it
cool,
could
man. I
just
hope
be
get
just
after it.
this terrible farce of an attempt, and it's terrible. No, I'm just kidding.
That's the editing process, bro. Somebody
it
will
is.
tell you. They'll be like, "Hey,
Yeah.
no, change this."
Yeah.
So no,
Yeah.
it
So
won't be.
that's an area where I'm excited. I don't know how to harness that excitement. And that's the point I'm at right now. I have this idea. And also I want to be out more. I want to get in front of people more, and I haven't done it enough. And so, I mentioned I did it last weekend, and it was kind of exciting. I was like, okay, man, I got some fresh voices. I interacted, and it's been a while since I've done that, and so I'm looking forward to a few weeks from now in October. I want to go to Ohio, even if it's just to talk to you guys and just touch base with people and just I don't know. That seems energizing to me as well.
Yeah. Oh, it's great. I don't. Have you gone to that conference?
No, no.
It's good. Yeah, it's at a new location this year, so I don't know if that's good or bad yet. Jim's excited about it, but I went last year, man, and it was a small conference. I mean, like less than 300 people,
Right.
and man, it was awesome. I loved every day of it. It was so great. So yeah, I'm looking forward to it. And they do a great job organizing it. I mean, it is very well done, which is hard to do, but their speakers are legit. That is a powerful thing. I mean, I in the audience, I watched James Geringer do a live interview with the Orlando police officer who was actually the guy who shot the Pulse nightclub shooter.
Right.
And he talked about the fallout from that in the time after. And that was an episode that he published on his podcast. And I was, in the audience when he recorded it. And the feeling around the room where everyone's like looking around, like, can you believe this shit? Like he's, you're the stuff they're saying and the rawness of it is very raw. That's the only word I guess I could use to describe it. Same thing like Brendan McDonough from Only the Brave, like the only survivor of the Prescott hotshots.
Yeah.
Telling his story, and obviously we know his story, but the part you don't know about the addiction, the family trauma, like all the stuff, and then the silver lining of positivity that comes with everything, where they're like, okay, so there's all the bad shit, but here's the thing, take action. Look how great life is right now. Look at all this other stuff, and the wellness programs, the mental health programs that the fire departments come up with, the technology that's been brought forward about how we communicate like all this stuff in anonymously. There's some really cool shit out there. All the resources that are brought to bear with therapy, with just like common sense stuff that you're like, good. So most importantly, like what I hate doing is going around and just like listening to people trying to get a trauma trophy, where you're like, listen to all the bad shit I did. No, listen to all the bad shit I did. I'm like, I'm all for talking, but what the fuck are we doing about it? Stop being in the awareness phase. What's the next step? And that's what I appreciate when on your podcast, you bring up a lot of this stuff and you're like, there's action items, and then taking steps for meaningful progress. And it doesn't always have to be, like you said, a fix, right? It doesn't have to be this medicine or whatever else, but it's what's the root cause of the problem, and how are we addressing it? So that's the cool thing I love about that conference. I always give a shout out to them, Brothers Helping Brothers in Ohio, but I think it's already past early bird, but they might still have tickets.
They
Check
still
it
have
out.
tickets.
Yeah, I'll be there. Stacks going, and you can follow them on Instagram too. The Brothers Helping Brothers, in exotic Beaver Creek, Ohio. It's in. I love that. By the way, man, that area in October is beautiful. It's really
Yeah.
nice. Yeah.
It's about the right time for leaves and all that shit.
Perfect. Yeah. The weather's like killer.
I don't
Really,
know.
really nice.
Our leaves are changing right now, dude. It's crazy. Shit's dropping from the trees already.
It's fucking 92 degrees here, Stack. It's 92 degrees here. 80% humidity. I hate talking about the weather because I'm like,
Yeah.
I'm like, oh man, I would love that. I like Florida. I like Florida. I don't want to shit on it, but damn.
Yeah, but seasons are nice too. I remember what it was like growing up in Florida.
I didn't know you grew up down here.
Yeah, just outside Orlando.
No way. Where at?
Winter Park, Maitland, Florida.
That's right. You remember saying Winter Park? Yes. Yeah. Good shit, man. I forgot about that. Cool. Yeah. So you get it. You know.
Yep.
Yeah, man, dude, it's been awesome. So if you guys aren't following the Things We All Carry on Instagram, it's a great way to kind of get a peek at a lot of some of Stack's musings, but also he gives you some clips of the podcasts that he does. What's the preferred platform to follow on podcasts, or are you kind of everywhere?
I'm everywhere. Wherever you find podcasts, you're going to find it. They push it out to all the platforms. The biggest one obviously being Apple, but Spotify's there as well, and you can find it on YouTube. But yeah, you just go to my Instagram and links are there. So at the Things We All Carry.
And how do people reach out to you if they want to get a hold of you?
You can email me at stack@thethingsweallcarry.com. And if you want to come on the show and you think you have a story you want to tell, the thing that I like to say is that everyone has a story to tell. I'm not here to compare traumas because Lord knows what you've seen is worse than what I've seen, or what I've seen is worse than what you've seen. I don't give a shit. It's not about what you've seen. It's about how it affects you and what you did with it after that. So if you think you got a story, reach out to me. I have the email set up for that. My story at thethingsweallcarry.com. Cool. And that's a great way to do it. But again, all the links are there on Instagram or even TikTok. I hate social media, but it's a necessary evil in this day and age. Unless you get banned, shadow banned, and then whatever. I don't know what to do. I get shadow banned a couple of times, especially when I start talking about psychedelics or I forget to change the spelling of suicide or guns or whatever, and they get mad at me. But I refuse to not talk about it because one of the things I didn't cover was why I did the show. It's or why, like a shirt like this that I'm wearing around that says "Just fucking talk." It's because we haven't done it enough, and we are still killing ourselves at astronomical rates, and in even higher rates, we're walking around with the thoughts of killing ourselves, and we think we're alone. We're not fucking alone. We just need to talk.
Yeah, because we do have all those solutions. They're definitely out there, and the more we talk about it, I think we could figure out whatever. I've come to realize that, but we can only start putting a plan in action when we realize there's a problem.
Right. And we most definitely have a problem in the fire service.
Absolutely, we do. And I want to say thank you for highlighting that and sharing that with people, and also just giving others a platform to speak. I know when people feel heard, they know there's hope, and others will come to their aid too. And not to mention, how many people do you think you've interviewed where someone else is listening going, fuck man, that's me,
Yeah,
like I have the same thing, and hey, and they're all right, like it's gonna be okay. So having that is important.
Every story I listen to and then I put out there into the world, every story that I edit, I sit there and I go, that part is me right there. There's always a snippet in those stories that's me. And so if that's happening to me, I know it's happening to the audience.
That just reminded me. I don't know. Now that I think about it, I've never actually asked you about your parents. I know your mom recently passed away, and terrible tragedy, but sorry to hear that. I know it's sad. But as far as like your childhood or whatever, that maybe that's a different podcast. But they
Yeah, so you
they
say, how many more hours do you have?
yeah, that's the thing is like talking, man. I love the aspect of it, of what you just the rabbit holes you go down. But there's a book called um Adult Children of Alcoholics.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you've read that one.
I have not.
And man, there's like, again, my dad, such a good dad. I talk to him all the time. He was an alcoholic, but it never, I mean, when I was a kid, I was like, so what? Dad likes to drink. Who gives a shit?
Right.
He was the one who was like, I have to stop this. Anyway, um, but there's so much shit in there where you're flipping through the pages and you go, holy shit, that's me.
Yeah.
That's me. Wait, that's me. And you're like, this all makes so much sense. And it's very uplifting to just look at it and be like, who knew this was all just like reproducible and normal? And I think you bring
Right.
that too. So I hope you do. Like, I think a lot of people, I think it happens probably a lot where people listen, because I've had it happen to me where I'm like, shit, man, I go through the same thing. That's cool. I appreciate that. That's awesome, man. Dude, thank you for being on here. I hope we'll do one more too. I mean, we'll just keep stacking them up. I like it. They have a, maybe we don't wait 18 months to do the next one, but this has been awesome, man. This is one of my favorites for sure. I loved this. So
Well, hopefully
I'll get it
what
out.
I rambled on about made sense once in a while. And so if anybody wants to yell at me, find me on social media. Come yell at me. I love the interaction.
Yeah, I don't even want to call it rambling. I think we talked a lot, but it was extremely important, and I think that there's a lot of people that listen that are close to retirement, or even if they're not, if they're thinking about retirement, where you can touch on those things, and the open mindedness of psychedelics and all that. That's pretty much our niche. Our audience is very open to that.
Yeah.
So it's good, but a lot of people I think are more on the cannabis side from me. Maybe they don't know as much about the other stuff. So I appreciate it. But yeah, this will be out, and I hope everybody gets a lot out of it. So thank you all, and take care and be safe out there. Stack, thanks, brother.
Thank you, man. I appreciate it.